Every Friday at 6 o'clock, my daughter called without fail. For 10 years, that phone rang like clockwork. Last Friday, it didn't. I told myself she was busy. Overtime at the hospital. A dead battery. But by midnight, after 7 unanswered calls, I knew something was wrong. So I drove to her house quietly at dawn, planning not to overreact. The driveway was empty. The curtains were drawn. Then I heard something move inside her daughter's closet, a faint rustling sound, like fabric shifting against the wall. When I opened that door, what I found left me shaking. I'm truly grateful you're here with me right now. It means more than you know. Before we continue, tell me, where are you listening from today? Drop your city or country in the comments so I can see how far this story is traveling. And can I ask you something personal? How old are you? I genuinely want to know who I'm sharing these stories with. Just a gentle note. Parts of this story include fictionalized elements for storytelling and reflection. Any resemblance to real names or places is coincidental, but the message behind it is very real, and I hope it stays with you. Every Friday at 6 o'clock, my daughter Allison would call. For 10 years, that phone rang like clockwork. Last Friday, it didn't. I'm Paul Brennan, 63 years old retired electrician living in a quiet corner of Tennessee, where the hills roll gentle and folks still wave when they pass your house. For 40 years, I made my living tracing circuits, finding where the current went wrong, fixing what was broken. You'd think after all that time working with my hands, retirement would feel earned, peaceful even. It did mostly, especially on Fridays. 6 o'clock sharp, every single Friday, my landline would ring. Yeah, I still use a landline, sue me. On the other end would be Allison, my only daughter, calling from her place up north, 2.5 hours away by highway, but she might as well have been right there in my kitchen. That's how close we've always been. Hey, Dad, she'd say, and I'd hear that smile in her voice. The same smile she'd had since she was 8 years old, standing in my workshop, asking why this wire went here and that one went there. Because everything connects, sweetheart, I'd tell her. You just have to trace it back to the source. She became a nurse instead of an electrician. Said she wanted to help people in a different way. I couldn't argue with that. Allison had a gift for caring, for making folks feel safe when they were at their most vulnerable. That's what good nurses do. That's what she did. Our Friday calls usually lasted an hour, sometimes more. She'd tell me about her shifts at regional hospital. The long ones, the hard ones, the ones that made her question everything until a patient smiled and said thank you. I'd tell her about my week, the garden, the leaky faucet I'd finally fixed in the guest bathroom, how Mrs. Patterson down the street still brought me casseroles, even though I kept telling her I could cook just fine. And then Amelia would grab the phone, my granddaughter, 10 years old, smart as a whip, full of questions about everything. Grandpa, when can I come visit Chum? This weekend, sweetheart, if your mom says it's okay. She'd visit most weekends, actually. Loved helping me in the garage, getting her hands greasy, learning how things worked. Just like her mother used to. Those Friday calls, they weren't just phone calls. They were the rhythm of my life. The thing I looked forward to more than anything else in my week. 6 o'clock every Friday, without fail. Until last Friday. I was sitting at my kitchen table, coffee cooling in my favorite mug, the one Allison gave me 15 years ago, with "World's Best Dad" printed on the side. 5:58 p.m. I glanced at the clock. 2 minutes. The phone sat silent on the wall mount. Old rotary dial, cream-colored plastic, same phone I'd had since the 90s. Still worked perfectly. Why replace something that isn't broken? 6 o'clock came. 6:05, 6:15. I picked up the receiver, heard the dial tone, set it back down. Nothing wrong with the line. So I dialed Allison's number, the one I'd memorized the day she moved into her own place 11 years ago. It rang and rang and rang. Then her voicemail. Hi, you've reached Allison. I can't come to the phone right now, but leave a message and I'll call you back. Hey, sweetheart, it's Dad. Just checking in since I didn't hear from you. Give me a call when you get a chance. I hung up, told myself she was busy. Late shift, probably. Allison worked hard, sometimes pulled 12-hour days when the hospital was short-staffed. She'd call back soon, except she always called on Fridays. Always. Even when she was exhausted. Even when Amelia was sick. Even during that terrible flu season 3 years ago when she'd been working doubles for 2 weeks straight. 6 o'clock every Friday. Something about this felt off. You spend 4 decades as an electrician. You develop a sixth sense for when something's wrong. That tingling at the base of your skull when you're staring at a perfectly normal-looking circuit. But you just know, there's a short somewhere waiting to cause trouble. That's what this felt like. I tried calling again at 7. Voicemail. 8 o'clock. Voicemail. 9 o'clock. Straight to voicemail this time. Phone was off, or dead battery maybe. I thought about Kevin then. My son-in-law. Married to Allison for 11 years, father to Amelia, financial advisor with an office downtown. Nice enough guy on the surface. Polite. Smiled at family gatherings. But lately, past few weeks, maybe a month, something about him had felt off, too. The last time I'd seen him was 3 weeks back when Amelia visited for the weekend. I'd asked Kevin about work making conversation, and he'd gotten twitchy, changed the subject fast, and his eyes, they didn't quite meet mine when he answered. 40 years tracing faulty wiring teaches you to spot the signs, the little inconsistencies, the things that don't quite add up. But I pushed the thought away. Kevin was fine. Allison was fine. They were probably just having a quiet evening. Movie night, maybe. Amelia asleep early. 10 o'clock, I called again. Voicemail. 11 o'clock. Voicemail. By the time midnight rolled around, I'd called 7 times. 7 calls, 7 voicemails, no answer. My coffee had gone cold hours ago. The house felt too quiet. That tingling sensation at the base of my skull had turned into something heavier, something that sat in my chest like a stone. I stood at my kitchen window, looking out at the empty street, the streetlights casting orange pools on the pavement. Somewhere out there, 2.5 hours north, my daughter wasn't answering her phone. My granddaughter wasn't asking me when she could visit next. Everything connects, I told Allison when she was 8. You just have to trace it back to the source. But what do you do when the connection goes dead? When there's no current flowing, no signal coming through? I set the phone back in its cradle one last time. Tomorrow, I told myself. I'd call again tomorrow morning. First thing. And if she didn't answer, then I'd figure something out. But standing there in my kitchen at midnight, staring at that silent phone, I already knew. By midnight, I'd called 7 times. The phone just kept ringing into the void. That's when I knew something was terribly wrong. Saturday morning brought no answers, only more questions twisting in my gut like bad wiring. I didn't sleep. I couldn't. I sat at my kitchen table all night watching the clock crawl past 1, 2, 3 in the morning. Every time I closed my eyes, I pictured Allison's name lighting up my phone screen, except the call never came. By the time gray light filtered through the curtains, I'd already brewed my 3rd pot of coffee since midnight. At 7:30 a.m., I called Regional Hospital. The receptionist answered with the bright, practiced cheerfulness of someone who'd been doing this too long. Regional Hospital. How may I direct your call? Nursing station, please. I'm trying to reach Allison Brennan. A click, a short hold, then a different voice. Older. Tired. 4th floor nursing. Hi, I'm looking for Allison Brennan. I'm her father. I haven't been able to reach her, and Allison. The woman's tone shifted. Concerned now. She called in sick Monday morning. Haven't seen her since. Is everything all right? The coffee in my stomach turned to lead. Sick since Monday. That's right. She sounded terrible, poor thing. Said she'd be back when she felt better. I thanked her and hung up. My hands were shaking. Allison never missed work. Not in 12 years of nursing. She'd show up with a cold, the flu, even a twisted ankle she could barely walk on. "People need me, Dad," she'd say. "I can't just not show up." I admired that dedication, worried about it too. And now she'd been gone an entire week. I dialed Kevin's number before I could stop myself. 3 rings, then his voice smooth, easy. Too easy. "Paul, hey, everything okay? That's what I'm trying to figure out." I kept my tone steady. "I can't reach Allison. Her phone's going straight to voicemail. What's going on?" A pause. Just a fraction too long. "Oh yeah, I should have called you. Allison took Amelia on a little trip. They needed some space. You know how she gets." "Space," I repeated. "What trip?" "Where did they go?" "Just out of town. Mother-daughter time. They'll be back in a few days." "Put Amelia on the phone. They're not here right now. Out exploring, I think." "Look, Paul, I'll have Allison call you when they get back. I'm sure she just needed a break." From everything I said slowly. "Like her job, the one she hasn't shown up to since Monday." Another pause. Longer. "Yeah, she was burned out. Needed time away from the hospital. She's fine. I promise." The way he said it, like he'd practiced, set off every alarm in my head. "Kevin, if something's wrong..." "Nothing's wrong. Really. I'll have her call you." He hung up. I stood there in my kitchen phone, still in my hand, trying to make sense of it. Kevin had always been careful, measured. Financial advisors had to project stability, inspire trust. But this felt different. This felt like lying. I called Joyce Wallace, next Allison's colleague and close friend. She answered on the second ring. "Mr. Brennan, is everything okay? That's what I'm trying to find out." "Have you heard from Allison?" "No." Joyce sounded worried. "I called her Wednesday, Thursday, yesterday. No answer. I even drove by Thursday evening, lights were off." She hesitated. "I'm really worried about her. You and me both." After we hung up, I opened my old laptop and pulled up Facebook. Allison didn't post much, just photos of Amelia, the occasional nursing article. Her last post was 2 weeks ago. A picture of Amelia's school art project. Before that, nothing for 3 weeks. I leaned back, rubbing my eyes. Maybe I was overreacting. Maybe she really did need a break, and I was just the overprotective father who couldn't let go. Except, 3 weeks ago, when Amelia spent the weekend with me, I'd called Kevin about something, can't remember what. Asked if he was still at the business conference he'd mentioned. He'd said yes, absolutely, just wrapping up meetings. Except Amelia had casually mentioned that Daddy had been home all weekend, watching football, ordering pizza. I hadn't pushed it. Maybe I misunderstood. Maybe she mixed up her days. But now, remembering that same smooth certainty in his voice, 40 years as an electrician teaches you to trust your instincts. When something feels off, even if every wire looks perfect, even if the meter says everything's fine, you keep looking. That tingling at the base of your skull isn't paranoia. It's pattern recognition. Your brain catching details your conscious mind hasn't sorted yet. Right now, every instinct I had was screaming the circuit was faulty. That somewhere in this situation, something had gone catastrophically wrong. I checked the clock. 8:45 a.m. 2.5 hours to Allison's house. If I left now, I'd be there before noon. But what if I was wrong? What if I showed up and she was fine and I'd made a fool of myself? Then I'd be a fool. I could live with that. What I couldn't live with was sitting here while that wrongness kept building inside me like pressure behind a dam. I went upstairs and threw clothes into an overnight bag. Medications, phone charger, the spare key Allison had given me years ago, just in case Dad, for emergencies. This felt like an emergency. Before leaving, I tried her number one more time. Straight to voicemail. That cheerful message, "Hi, you've reached Allison. I can't come to the phone right now, but leave a message and I'll call you back. Sweetheart, it's Dad again. I'm driving up tomorrow morning. First thing. If you get this before, then please call me. I just need to know you're okay." I hung up and set my alarm for 5 a.m. Tried to sleep, couldn't. So I lay there in the dark, thinking about circuits and connections, how everything ties back to a source, and what happens when the current stops flowing. And I thought about Kevin's voice, that smooth, practiced tone, the tone of someone hiding something. I tightened the zipper on my bag and set it by the door. Something told me I needed to get there fast. I just didn't know I was already 6 days too late. The sunrise painted the Tennessee hills in amber and rose, but I barely noticed. My truck hummed along the empty highway at 5:30 in the morning, carrying me toward a world that felt 2.5 hours and a lifetime away. The coffee in my thermos had gone cold, but I kept sipping it anyway. Anything to steady my hands on the wheel. I'd made this drive hundreds of times. Every major holiday, every birthday. Whenever Allison needed help with something around the house that Kevin couldn't or wouldn't fix. But this morning, the familiar route felt different. The white lines blurred together, and the miles stretched endlessly ahead. My mind drifted to a warm afternoon when Allison was 8. We'd been rewiring the kitchen light fixture together, her small hands holding the wires while I stripped the insulation. "Daddy, why does this wire go here?" she'd asked, brown eyes wide. "Because everything's connected, sweetheart," I told her, showing how the ground wire completed the circuit. "You can't see electricity, but you can feel when something's wrong. When a connection's loose, there's a hum in the air. A warning." She'd nodded as if I'd shared a secret. Maybe I had. That memory shifted to Allison at 22, fresh out of nursing school. We'd sat on her apartment balcony watching the sunset. "I want to help people, Dad," she'd said. "The way you fix things. Make them work again when they're broken." I'd been so proud. She'd found her own way of completing circuits, healing people instead of wiring houses. Then came the wedding 11 years ago. I'd walked her down the aisle in a small church outside town, her hand trembling on my arm. Kevin stood at the altar in a rented tuxedo, polished smiles and confident gestures. Something about him had felt off even then, like a wire that looked fine but carried too much resistance underneath. I'd mentioned it carefully the week before. "Dad, I love him," she'd said. "Isn't that enough?" After that, I kept my doubts to myself. What kind of father ruins his daughter's happiness? I'd smiled, shaken Kevin's hand, and told myself I was overprotective. Now, 10 years later, I wondered if I should have trusted my instincts. The highway stretched on. I passed a rest stop, a gas station, a town I'd never heard of. My thoughts circled the last few months. Kevin had been coming home later and later, or so Allison mentioned during our Friday calls. "He's busy with work," she'd say, but her voice always sounded tight, like a wire pulled too far. 3 weeks ago, I'd driven down for Amelia's birthday. We'd been on the porch steps eating ice cream when she asked something that still tightened my chest. "Grandpa, what do you do when someone lies to you?" I looked at her serious little face, chocolate smeared on her chin. "Why do you ask, honey?" She shrugged, suddenly interested in her shoelaces. "Just wondering." I should have pressed her, asked more questions. But I let it go, assuming it was kid drama, a classmate fibbing about a toy. My phone buzzed in the cup holder. Hope flared for a second, but it wasn't Allison, just a reminder I'd set. I grabbed it anyway and dialed Kevin again. 4 rings, then voicemail. "This is Kevin Marshall. Leave a message." "Kevin, it's Paul," I said, keeping my voice steady. "I'm on my way to the house. If Allison and Amelia are there, have her call me immediately. If they're still on this supposed trip, I need proof. A photo, a video call, something. I'll be there in less than an hour." I hung up and set the phone down. 40 years I'd worked with electricity. 40 years of learning to sense a problem before I could see it. When a circuit's about to fail, there's a prickling at the back of your neck, a hum you can't quite hear, but somehow know is there. That's what I'd felt all weekend. That warning hum. Kevin's smooth excuses, his convenient explanations, his perfectly calibrated tone, they were wrong. Like a wire carrying too much current, ready to spark. The hills flattened as I neared the suburbs. Neat rows of identical houses appeared, white siding, small yards, 2-car garages. This was where Allison had built her life. where Amelia learned to ride a bike and started 4th grade. I turned onto Oakwood Drive and slowed. Number 47. The house looked quiet. Too quiet. No car in the driveway. No lights in the windows. The lawn needed mowing, and a package sat on the porch steps, cardboard corners darkened by damp air. I pulled over across the street and killed the engine. For a long moment, I sat gripping the steering wheel, staring at my daughter's house. Every instinct screamed at me to march up to that door and kick it open if I had to. But I forced myself to breathe, to think like an electrician. I crossed that quiet street like a man walking toward his own judgment. Kevin's silver sedan wasn't in the driveway, just an empty concrete slab with an oil stain in the center. Every curtain in the house was drawn tight. The morning sun hit the windows at an angle that made them look like closed eyes. I climbed the porch steps, my boots heavy on the wood. A package sat by the door, its cardboard edges soft with morning dew. The label showed a delivery date from 5 days ago. I knocked. 3 solid raps that echoed through the subdivision. Nothing. I knocked again, harder this time, my knuckles stinging against the wood. Allison Amelia. My voice sounded too loud in the quiet neighborhood. A dog barked somewhere down the street, still nothing. I pressed my ear against the door, listening. No footsteps, no television, no sound at all except the faint hum of the refrigerator motor running inside. That's when I remembered. 2 summers ago, Allison had locked herself out while taking trash to the curb. I'd driven down to help her, spent 20 minutes trying to jimmy the door before she'd laughed and shown me her secret. "Dad, I'm a nurse. I work odd hours. I needed a backup plan." She'd led me to a decorative rock near the front flower bed, one of those hollow fake stones people use to hide spare keys. "Don't tell Kevin," she'd said, winking. "He thinks it's tacky, but it makes me feel safer." I jumped off the porch and scanned the flower bed. There, partially hidden under a wilting azalea bush, sat a gray plastic rock that didn't quite match the others. I grabbed it, twisted the bottom, and the key fell into my palm. My hand shook as I climbed back up the steps and slid the key into the lock. The deadbolt clicked open with a sound that felt too final, like I was crossing a line I couldn't uncross. I pushed the door open. The smell hit me first. Not anything obvious. No decay, no violence, just the stale air of a house that had been closed up too long. Like someone had turned off the heat and left. I stepped inside and closed the door behind me. The living room looked almost normal. Almost. But my electrician's eye caught what was wrong. The coffee table sat at a slight angle, like someone had shoved it aside and then tried to put it back. The couch cushions were arranged too perfectly, the kind of perfect that comes from someone frantically straightening up. A throw pillow lay on the floor behind the armchair, as if it had been kicked there and forgotten. I moved deeper into the room. The family photos on the mantel had been rearranged, or maybe just bumped. The carpet showed vacuum lines, but they ran in odd directions, overlapping in places, like someone had cleaned in a hurry, without thinking about the pattern. "But Allison, I called out. My voice sounded strange in the empty house. "Amelia?" No answer. I walked into the kitchen. It was spotless. Too spotless. The counters gleamed. The sink shone. Even the stovetop looked freshly scrubbed. But when I opened the refrigerator, I found only beer bottles, Chinese takeout containers, and a half-empty gallon of milk that had expired 4 days ago. Nothing a 10-year-old would eat. No juice boxes, no string cheese, no leftovers in plastic containers with Amelia's name on them. I checked the dish towel hanging on the oven handle. It was damp, recently used. That's when I heard it. A soft sound from upstairs. So faint I almost thought I'd imagined it. A scratching like fingernails against wood. My heart hammered against my ribs. I moved to the stairs, my hand gripping the banister. The second floor was dark, all the bedroom doors closed. The scratching came again, barely audible, from Amelia's room. I took the stairs 2 at a time, my boots pounding on the carpet. When I reached the landing, I grabbed the doorknob to Amelia's room and threw it open. The room looked untouched. Pink curtains filtered the sunlight into a rosy glow. Stuffed animals lined the shelves in perfect rows. A backpack sat in the corner, school folders visible through the open zipper. Everything looked normal, lived in, loved, except for the sound. Scratch, scratch, pause, scratch, coming from the closet. I crossed the room in 3 steps and yanked open the closet door. There, curled up behind a pile of winter coats, was Amelia, my granddaughter. Her lips were cracked and bleeding, her skin pale except for the fevered flush on her cheeks. Her eyes, glassy and unfocused, barely registered my presence. Her small hands clutched the stuffed bunny to her chest, the same faded blue rabbit Allison had bought her 7 years ago. Its fur was matted with tears and sweat. "Grandpa," she whispered, her voice like dry leaves scraping against pavement. I dropped to my knees and gathered her into my arms. She weighed nothing, just bones and burning skin. When I pressed my hand to her forehead, the heat scared me. Her breathing came in shallow gasps, each one a struggle. "I've got you, sweetheart," I said, my voice breaking. "I've got you." She looked up at me, and for a moment I saw recognition in her eyes. "Grandpa." I heard Mama scream, and then everything went quiet. My hands shook as I pulled out my phone and dialed 911. 911, what's your emergency? "I need an ambulance," I said, trying to keep my voice steady. 47 Oakwood Drive. My granddaughter, she's 10 years old. Severe dehydration, high fever. She's been alone for... My voice caught. "Please hurry." I gave them the rest of the information while holding Amelia against my chest, feeling every labored breath she took. Her fingers dug into my shirt, weak but desperate. "How long, sweetheart?" I whispered into her hair. "How long have you been in there?" Her answer made my heart stop. "I don't know, Grandpa. I stopped counting after 7 days." The ambulance ride to Regional Children's Hospital took 20 minutes. It felt like 20 hours. Amelia drifted in and out of consciousness, her small hand gripping mine like I was the only solid thing left in her world. "Severe dehydration," the paramedic said, adjusting the oxygen mask over Amelia's face. "Malnutrition. This child has been alone for days." I didn't correct him. Didn't say it had been 7 days. I just held my granddaughter's hand and watched her chest rise and fall, each breath a small miracle. The ER was chaos. Doctors and nurses surrounded Amelia the moment we arrived, their movements precise and urgent. They transferred her to a gurney hooked up IV lines, called out numbers I didn't understand. Someone tried to pull me back, but I wouldn't let go of her hand. "Sir, we need space to work." "I'm not leaving her," I said. A young doctor with kind eyes nodded. "Stay against the wall. Don't get in the way." I pressed myself into the corner and watched them save my granddaughter's life. Blood pressure cuff, temperature check, blood draws, more IV bags. The numbers slowly improved. The tension in the room gradually eased. After what felt like hours, but was probably 40 minutes, they moved Amelia to a private room. The IV drip continued steady and rhythmic. Monitors beeped softly. Her fever had started to come down. I pulled a chair close to her bed and sat down. My whole body ached from the drive, from the fear, from holding myself together when everything inside me wanted to break. 7 days. My 10-year-old granddaughter had survived 7 days alone. But how? Amelia stirred her eyes, opening slowly. They were clearer now, more focused. She looked at me and I saw recognition, real recognition, for the first time since I'd found her. "Grandpa," she whispered. "I'm here, sweetheart." I squeezed her hand gently. "You're safe now." She was quiet for a moment, her gaze drifting to the stuffed bunny they'd let her keep. It sat on the bedside table, matted and worn, but somehow still comforting. "Mama taught me," she said finally, her voice hoarse. "In case something bad happened." My throat tightened. What did she teach you? Amelia's eyes filled with tears. Months ago. Maybe. Maybe since summer, Mama would come into my room at night and tell me things. She said if I ever heard loud arguing, really loud, scary arguing, I should go straight to my closet and hide. She said not to come out until you called my name, or the police. I felt something cold settle in my chest. Allison had known. She'd known she was in danger, and had prepared her daughter like someone preparing an escape route. That Saturday night, Amelia continued. I was reading in bed. Then I heard them. Kevin was yelling. Mama was crying. It got so loud. She swallowed hard. I did what Mama said. I went to my closet and closed the door. You did exactly right. I told her, my voice breaking. Mama showed me where she hid snacks, Amelia said. In my toy box under the stuffed animals, crackers and granola bars. She said it was our secret emergency kit. She told me to eat just a little bit every day if I ever had to hide. The image of Allison carefully hiding food for her daughter, planning for the worst, made my chest ache. What about water? I asked. At night, when the house got really quiet, I would sneak out and go to the bathroom. I drank from the sink and filled up my water bottle. Then I'd go back to the closet before it got light. She looked down at her hands. I was so scared every time. But Mama said being brave means doing scary things when you have to. God, Allison. What had you been living through? Even the bunny helped too, Amelia added, reaching for it. Mama gave it to me when I was little. She said whenever I held it, I should pretend she was hugging me. So that's what I did. Every night. I had to look away for a moment, blinking hard against the tears. Why didn't you try to leave? I asked gently. Or call for help. Amelia's answer was simple. Mama said to wait for you. She said you'd come. She said you always keep your promises, and you promised to call every Friday. So if you didn't call, you'd come looking. She told me to wait for you, Grandpa. Nobody else. The weight of that trust, Allison's faith in me, Amelia's patience, nearly broke me. My daughter had spent the last months of her life teaching her child how to survive without her. She'd hidden food, rehearsed instructions, made plans for a future where she wouldn't be there. She'd known Kevin was dangerous, and she'd done everything she could to protect Amelia. But she hadn't been able to save herself. Oh, you did so good, sweetheart, I whispered, taking Amelia's hand again. Your mama would be so proud of you. Amelia's eyes started to close, exhaustion finally winning. The IV drip continued its steady rhythm. Her breathing deepened, and within minutes, she was asleep. I sat there in the dim hospital room, watching her chest rise and fall, listening to the monitors beep their reassurance. She was alive. Against all odds, my granddaughter was alive. A soft knock on the door made me look up. Detective Noah Carter stood in the doorway, his expression serious. Mr. Brennan, he said quietly. Can we talk in the hall? I glanced at Amelia one more time, then stood and followed him out. The hallway was bright and sterile, nurses moving past with clipboards and medicine carts. Carter pulled out a small notebook. I need to ask you some questions about your daughter. About Allison. I nodded, bracing myself. He flipped through a few pages, then looked up at me. When was the last time you actually saw her in person? I thought back. 3 weeks. Amelia's birthday party. Allison had looked tired that day, I remembered. Distracted. But she'd smiled and served cake and said everything was fine. Through the window of Amelia's room, I could see her sleeping peacefully, still clutching that worn blue bunny. She was alive because Allison had taught her how to hide, how to wait, how to survive. And I said the words I'd been avoiding since I'd found that empty house. My daughter is dead, isn't she? Kevin did this to her. The next morning, after Amelia had slept 12 straight hours with IV fluids helping her small body recover, Dr. Samantha Reed arrived. Detective Carter introduced her as a child psychologist, someone trained to speak with traumatized children. She was younger than I expected, late 30s maybe, with kind eyes and a calm, gentle presence. She carried a worn leather bag stuffed with art supplies and greeted Amelia like they were old friends, not strangers, in a hospital room. Detective Carter pulled me into the hallway. There's an observation room next door, one-way glass. You can watch and listen, but she needs to talk without you present. Kids sometimes hold back when family's in the room. I nodded. I need to hear it, even if it destroys me. He led me into a small room with darkened glass overlooking Amelia's bed. On my side, the window was a mirror. On theirs, it was clear. A small speaker crackled to life. Dr. Reed settled beside Amelia and spread out paper and colored pencils. "I heard you're very brave," she said softly. "Is it okay if we talk for a bit? You can draw while we talk." Amelia nodded and chose a blue pencil. "Can you draw what you remember from Saturday night?" Dr. Reed asked, gently. "Just the people." Amelia's hand moved slowly. 3 stick figures appeared. Above them, in careful letters, she wrote Dad. A woman. Mom. "Tell me about Saturday night," Dr. Reed said. "What do you remember?" Amelia's voice was barely above a whisper. Dad and a woman came to the door. It was late. After dinner. They were loud. What were they saying? They were yelling at Mom about money. The woman said Mom owed them something. Mom said no. She said she didn't have any money. My fists tightened at my sides. What happened next? Dr. Reed's tone remained steady. They got louder. Dad was mad. He said Mom was ruining everything. The woman said Mom was selfish. Amelia pressed harder on the paper, darkening the figures. Mom told them to leave. She said she was calling Grandpa. "God, Allison, you were trying to reach me." Then I heard Amelia's voice cracked. Terrible sounds. Mama was crying. She was begging them to stop. She kept saying, "Please, please think of Amelia." Through the glass, I watched my granddaughter's face crumple. Dr. Reed handed her a tissue and waited. The woman said, "We have to finish this." And then Dad said Amelia stopped, her body rigid. "It's okay," Dr. Reed whispered. Dad said, "I'm sorry." Right before Mama stopped making any sound, I gripped the edge of the table to stay upright. My chest felt like wire pulled tight around it. Detective Carter's hand settled on my shoulder. "2 people," he murmured. "Your son-in-law and a woman. We need to identify her." I forced myself to think. "Chelsea," I said hoarsely. "Kevin mentioned someone named Chelsea once. An ex. He said it was over. Last name? Parker. I think Chelsea Parker. Allison once said Kevin acted strange when she came up." Carter made a note. "We'll find her. Can you keep listening?" I nodded, though I wasn't okay. The interview lasted another 20 minutes. Amelia described hiding in her closet, hearing footsteps, hearing her father say they needed to clean up, hearing the woman mention a storage unit. When it ended, Dr. Reed spoke briefly with Carter. Then I was allowed back into the room. Amelia looked impossibly small in that hospital bed, surrounded by monitors and wires. When she saw me, she reached for my hand. "I'm sorry, Grandpa," she whispered. "You have nothing to be sorry for," I said. Nothing. That night, while Amelia slept, Carter got a call. Forensics had finished at the house. He needed to come in. Tuesday morning, he found me in the hospital cafeteria, staring into my 4th cup of coffee. He sat down across from me and placed a tablet on the table. "I need to show you something. It won't be easy." "Show me." He opened a series of photos. The living room I'd stood in days earlier, but under ultraviolet light. Purple-blue patterns glowed across the couch, the coffee table, the wall. Sprays, smears, areas someone had tried to scrub clean. Luminol, Carter said. "It reacts to blood, even when it's been cleaned." I stared at the glowing evidence. "Your daughter fought back," he said quietly. "There are clear signs of a struggle. Defensive patterns." He paused. "But we still haven't found her body." The words felt unreal. "Kevin and Chelsea took her somewhere," I said. "We believe so. We're getting a warrant for all storage units tied to Kevin Marshall or anyone connected to him. We've issued a BOLO for Kevin and Chelsea Parker. I looked again at the images Allison's living room transformed into a map of violence. The place where she'd made breakfast, folded laundry, lived her life, and where that life had ended. Find them, I said. Carter's jaw tightened. We will. And when we do, they'll answer for every second of what they did to your daughter. 5 weeks. 5 weeks of investigation, dead ends, and sleepless nights. 5 weeks of Amelia asking when we could have a funeral for her mother. 5 weeks until Detective Carter's call came. Paul, we found her. An anonymous tip from a storage facility manager on the edge of town. He'd noticed a strange smell coming from Unit 42. When police arrived with a warrant, they found what we'd been dreading. I had to drive to the county morgue to identify the body. My hands shook on the steering wheel the entire way. The highway blurred past the same route I'd driven that Sunday morning 5 weeks ago, full of worry, but still hoping I was wrong. Now I knew I'd been right. I'd just been too late. The county morgue sat in a low brick building behind the hospital. Detective Carter waited for me in the parking lot, his face grave. You don't have to do this, he said as we walked toward the entrance. We have dental records. DNA confirmation is already underway. I told him. I need to see her. Inside, the air was cold and smelled of chemicals. A medical examiner in blue scrubs met us in a hallway lined with filing cabinets. She was maybe 50 with kind eyes and a professional manner that came from years of delivering the worst news imaginable. "I'm Mr. Brennan," she said gently. "I'm Dr. Helen Martinez. I'll be with you the entire time. If you need to step out at any point, that's okay." I nodded, not trusting my voice. She led us to a small viewing room. In the center sat a metal table covered by a white sheet. The shape underneath was unmistakable. "Are you ready?" Dr. Martinez asked. I wasn't. Would never be. But I nodded anyway. She pulled back the sheet, folding it carefully at Allison's shoulders. My daughter looked like she was sleeping. Her face was peaceful, almost serene. Her dark hair had been brushed back from her forehead. She looked younger than 34. She looked like the girl who used to help me wire light fixtures and ask endless questions about how electricity worked, except for the marks around her neck. I couldn't look away from them. Faint bruising in a pattern I didn't want to understand, but couldn't help recognizing. Someone's hands had been there. Someone had taken her last breath. I could see she fought. I said, my voice barely above a whisper. "The bruises on her arms." Dr. Martinez nodded. "Defensive wounds. Your daughter fought very hard, Mr. Brennan." I reached out slowly, hesitantly, and touched Allison's hand. It was cold. So cold. This was the same hand that had gripped my finger when she was a baby. The same hand I'd held when teaching her to ride a bike. The same hand she'd reached out to me with at her high school graduation. "I'm sorry, sweetheart," I whispered. "I should have protected you. Should have trusted my instincts about Kevin. Should have gotten you out of there." Detective Carter placed a hand on my shoulder but said nothing. Dr. Martinez gave me a moment before speaking again. "The official cause of death is asphyxiation. Based on lividity and body temperature at discovery time of death was Saturday evening, approximately 10:30 p.m. Saturday. The night Amelia had hidden in her closet and listened to her mother die. We found DNA evidence under her fingernails." Dr. Martinez continued, her tone remaining clinical but gentle. "It's a match for Kevin Marshall. She scratched him during the struggle. Good, I thought. Good. At least she'd left evidence. At least she'd marked the man who killed her. The body was moved between 2 and 3 hours after death," Dr. Martinez added. "The storage unit was rented under a fake name, Michael Thompson, and paid for in cash. 3 months up front." "Premeditated," Detective Carter said quietly. "He had it planned." Something shifted inside me in that cold room. The grief that had been weighing me down for 5 weeks began to harden into something else, something sharper, more focused. Determination. We're building a solid homicide case, Carter said. First-degree murder, premeditated. With Amelia's testimony and the physical evidence, we have everything we need. We just need to find Kevin and Chelsea. I looked down at Allison one more time. My strong, brave daughter, who'd spent her last months teaching her child how to survive. Who'd fought her killers even knowing she couldn't win. Who'd loved Amelia enough to prepare for the worst. How long? I asked Dr. Martinez. How long until we can have a funeral? We'll release her body within the week. The autopsy is complete. I nodded. At least Amelia could say goodbye properly. At least we could give Allison the dignity Kevin had stolen from her. I leaned down and kissed my daughter's forehead one last time. Cold. So cold. He will pay, I whispered against her skin. Kevin Marshall will spend the rest of his life in prison thinking about what he did to you. I swear it. When I straightened up, Detective Carter was watching me carefully. Justice, I said. That's all I want now. Justice for my daughter. You'll have it, Carter promised. We'll make sure of it. I took one last look at Allison, memorizing her face, storing it away with all my other memories of her, and then turned and walked out of that morgue with a singular purpose burning in my chest. In the week after I left the morgue, Detective Carter worked non-stop financial records, phone logs, witness interviews. When he called and asked me to come to the station, I knew he'd found something big. The conference room walls were covered in paper bank statements, insurance documents, spreadsheets marked in yellow. Carter sat across from me with a thick folder open. I want to show you what we've built, he said. The motive, the planning, all of it. He slid the first document over. A life insurance policy. $500,000, he said. Allison took it out when Amelia was born. Standard term policy. She never changed the beneficiary. I stared at Kevin Marshall's name listed as sole beneficiary. He would have gotten all of it, I said quietly. If she'd died from natural causes or an accident, yes. Carter handed me another stack. But here's where it changes. Kevin had serious debt. He spread out credit reports and bank statements. Total debt, $385,000. The numbers blurred together. $250,000 lost in a Ponzi scheme, Carter continued. He was recruited by a man named Robert Miller, guaranteed cryptocurrency returns. The operation collapsed. Kevin lost everything he invested and had borrowed heavily to put in more. And the rest? Casino gambling, $135,000. Maxed credit cards. Personal loans. He was drowning. Carter turned his tablet toward me. Browser history from Kevin's laptop. 3 weeks before Allison died, he searched. How long does life insurance pay out after death? My hands curled into fists. He planned it. He looked at my daughter and saw $500,000. There's more, Carter said. He passed me a handwritten statement. Your neighbor, Mrs. Gladys Whitmore, 70 years old, lives 2 doors down. I nodded. Sweet woman who loved to wave from her porch. She saw a silver SUV parked outside Allison's house Saturday night around 10. Thought it was family. It wasn't, I said. The neighbor across the street has a security camera. We pulled the footage. Grainy video filled the screen. 2 vehicles in the driveway. Kevin's black sedan and the silver SUV. Timestamp 9:45 p.m. arrival. They left together at 11:30, an hour after Allison died. An hour spent cleaning, moving her body, covering their tracks. We traced the SUV registration, Carter said. Chelsea Parker, 30 years old, lives 40 minutes away. He showed me her driver's license photo. Blonde hair, hard eyes. Kevin's ex from 10 years ago. They broke up when he married Allison, but they reconnected recently. Over 200 calls between them in the last 3 months. Long calls. She helped him, I said. She had reason to, Carter replied. Chelsea Parker has gambling debts too, around 80,000. Together they were buried. That insurance policy looked like an escape. I thought of Amelia's drawing. The woman at the door. The woman who said, "We have to finish this." Chelsea Parker had been there. She had helped murder my daughter. There's another piece, Carter said quietly. He slid a statement across the table. Joyce Wallace, Allison's colleague. Allison had trusted Joyce. Joyce told us Allison came to her 2 weeks before she died. Upset. Kevin had asked her to increase the life insurance policy to $750,000. Allison refused. She told Joyce she was scared. The words hit like a blow. She knew I whispered. Allison knew something was wrong. She did, Carter said. And when she refused to increase the policy and likely started pulling away, Kevin couldn't risk losing control. If she changed the beneficiary or filed for divorce, he'd lose everything. I pressed my hands against my eyes. My daughter had been afraid. She had seen the danger. And I hadn't pushed harder. Hadn't insisted she leave. We've issued an arrest warrant for Chelsea Parker. Carter continued. She's not in custody yet, but we'll find her. And Kevin, Carter paused. His attorney posted bail this morning. $2 million. The room seemed to tilt. He's out, with an ankle monitor and strict conditions. His lawyer argued he isn't a flight risk since his daughter is here, and there's no direct eyewitness placing him at the moment of death. Carter's jaw tightened. The judge agreed. I stood so quickly, my chair scraped across the floor. The man who killed my daughter is walking free, for now, Carter said evenly. But we're building a case that won't leave room for doubt. Financial motive, digital searches, surveillance footage, witness testimony. Your granddaughter's statement. It will be airtight. I looked down at the table, the insurance policy, the debt statements, the browser history, the security stills. A trail of greed and desperation, mapped out in black ink and pixels. Kevin hadn't acted in rage. He had calculated, planned, weighed the cost against the payout. $500,000. That was what he'd decided Allison's life was worth. And Chelsea, I asked. She'll face the same charges, Carter said. Conspiracy, first-degree murder, evidence tampering. We're not letting either of them slip away. I let out a slow breath. The grief was still there, heavy and suffocating. But beneath it, something else was forming. Resolve. That's when my real fight begins, I said quietly. Carter looked at me. Your real fight. Kevin Marshall's expensive lawyer just bought him temporary freedom. The man who took my daughter from me is walking around with an ankle monitor instead of handcuffs. I met his eyes. So yes, this is when my real fight begins. Carter didn't argue. He didn't need to. The evidence was on that table. The motive was clear. The plan was exposed. Now it was a matter of finishing what they had started in that courtroom, making sure Kevin Marshall and Chelsea Parker paid for every choice they made. And I would be there for every step of it. Fighting the legal system felt like repairing live wiring in the dark. Every time I thought I'd found the right connection, something else sparked and failed. 2 days after Kevin posted bail, his defense attorney made his move. Gerald Hawkins was exactly what I'd imagined, silver hair tailored three-piece suit, a man who billed more per hour than I once earned in a week. He didn't hesitate. Kevin filed a police report claiming I had kidnapped Amelia from his house. Never mind that I'd found her half-starved in a closet after he'd abandoned her there for 7 days. Never mind that he and Chelsea had murdered my daughter. According to his version, I was an unstable grandfather who had broken in and stolen his child. Then came the motions filed so fast I could barely keep track. Motion to dismiss Amelia's testimony too young, too traumatized, unreliable. Motion to exclude the financial records circumstantial, irrelevant. Motion for a restraining order Paul Brennan prohibited from coming within 500 feet of Kevin Marshall, or contacting him in any way. And then Kevin went on local television. I watched it at Joyce's house, gripping the arm of her couch. Kevin sat in a neutral, tasteful living room, not Allison's house, wearing a solemn expression. "I'm innocent," he said calmly. "This is a tragedy for everyone involved. But my father-in-law has never accepted me. Now he's using this situation to destroy my life. I loved Allison. I would never hurt her." The reporter asked about Amelia. "I'm grateful she's safe," Kevin replied. "But she's traumatized. Children that age can be confused, especially when influenced by adults with their own agenda." I shut off the television before I smashed it. The next morning, 2 officers knocked on my door. They needed to ask questions about my entry into Kevin Marshall's residence. I sat in an interrogation room for 3 hours while they dissected every detail. Yes, I entered the house. Yes, I used the spare key Allison had given me years ago. Yes, technically I had trespassed. And yes, if Kevin had tried to physically block me from reaching my granddaughter, I would have pushed him aside. "You understand this puts you in a difficult position," one officer said carefully. "Breaking and entering. Potential custody interference. If you're perceived as unstable or aggressive, you could lose guardianship." The message was clear. Back off or risk losing Amelia. That afternoon, I withdrew $5,000 from my retirement savings and hired Margaret Dawson, a family attorney Joyce recommended. It was money meant for Amelia's future college medical emergencies, whatever she might need. Now it was going to legal fees. "You need protection," Margaret said at our first meeting. "Kevin's team will attack your credibility relentlessly. We have to be proactive." I signed the retainer agreement and tried not to think about how that money had been set aside for my granddaughter, not for fighting her father's lies. Joyce came by that evening with a casserole and resolve. "I'll watch Amelia whenever you need," she said. "Emma's been good for her. They're close in age. It helps." Emma, her 12-year-old daughter, had been kind to Amelia from the start. The thought of my granddaughter having a friend, someone her own age who understood loss, tightened my throat. "Allison was like a sister to me," Joyce added. "We worked together 8 years. She told me everything. I know what Kevin is. I know what he did. I'll help you however I can." It was the first real warmth I'd felt since this began. Carter believed in the case, but he was bound by procedure. Margaret was capable but distant. Joyce had loved my daughter. "Thank you," I said. But even her support couldn't silence the rumors. The community began to shift. Some neighbors saw me as a bitter old man with a vendetta. Kevin's public relations campaign was effective. A polished financial advisor, a grieving widower. How could someone like that commit murder? I stopped going to church. I couldn't endure the sideways glances or conversations that hushed when I approached. Detective Carter called one evening. "Paul, I believe you, but belief isn't enough. We need evidence, not emotion. Don't give Kevin ammunition. He's trying to paint you as unstable. Don't help him," I promised. But the pressure kept building. One night I drove to Allison's house. I told myself I was looking for anything the forensic team might have missed. Instead, I ended up sitting on the living room floor, where luminol had revealed the heaviest blood patterns. The professionals had cleaned it. You couldn't see anything now. But I could. I saw my daughter fighting for her life. I saw Amelia upstairs hiding. For the first time since finding Amelia in that closet, I broke. The grief came in waves I couldn't control. I thought about walking away, taking Amelia somewhere new, starting over, letting the justice system grind forward without me. Then I remembered Amelia waiting in that closet for 7 days because she believed I would come. She trusted me. I couldn't fail her now. I stood, wiped my face, and went to my truck. I grabbed a notebook and began making a list. Every person who might know something. Every unanswered question. Every detail that needed rechecking. Every angle not yet explored. Kevin wanted a fight. He would get one. That night I made myself a promise. I would knock on every door, call every witness, follow every lead. Kevin Marshall had money lawyers and a polished public image, but I had something stronger. I had the truth, And I had a father's love that would never quit. 2 months after I found Amelia in that closet, I almost lost everything. Kevin's lawyer had filed a motion to dismiss the entire case. Lack of evidence, they claimed, and the judge was listening. I sat in the courtroom gallery, hands clenched on the wooden bench in front of me, watching Gerald Hawkins make his argument. He stood at the defense table in his expensive suit, every word precisely calculated. Your Honor, the prosecution's case rests entirely on circumstantial evidence. There is no eyewitness to the alleged crime. No murder weapon has been recovered. My client has provided no confession. The testimony of a traumatized 10-year-old child, while tragic, cannot be the sole basis for a first-degree murder charge. Mr. Marshall deserves to have these charges dismissed. Carol Bennett, the district attorney, stood to argue back. She was good, I'd seen her work before, but even I could see the judge's skeptical expression as she laid out our case. So the court will take this under advisement, the judge said finally. I'll issue my ruling within 48 hours. The gavel came down and my stomach dropped with it. Outside the courthouse, Detective Carter pulled me aside. His face was grim. We might lose this, Paul, he said quietly. I'm sorry. We did everything we could, but no, I cut him off. Not after we've come this far. There has to be something. Some piece we're missing. Carter squeezed my shoulder. If there is, we'll find it. But we're running out of time. That night, I couldn't sleep. I sat at my kitchen table at 1 a.m, surrounded by copies of every financial document Carter had shown me. Bank statements, credit card bills, insurance policies. I'd been through them a dozen times already, but I spread them out again, looking for anything, any detail I might have missed. That's when I saw it, buried in Kevin's bank statements from 8 months ago, a deposit for $95,000. The notation read, MZ Consulting. I stared at it, my tired brain trying to make the connection. I'd seen this before. Carter had mentioned it in passing. But what was it? What was MZ Consulting? I grabbed my phone and called Carter. He answered on the third ring, his voice thick with sleep. Paul, it's past midnight. That deposit, I said. The $95,000 from MZ Consulting. What if it's connected to Kevin's debts? What if it's not legitimate business income? There was a pause. Then I heard rustling like Carter was sitting up. Hold on, let me pull up the file. I waited, my heart pounding, while he searched through his computer. MZ Consulting, Carter said slowly. I flagged it as unusual income, but Kevin's tax returns showed it as consulting fees. We didn't dig deeper because... He trailed off. Because we were focused on the debts, not the income. Can you dig deeper now? I asked. I'll start first thing in the morning. He called me back 6 hours later. I hadn't gone to bed. Paul, you might have just saved this case, Carter said, and I could hear the excitement in his voice. MZ Consulting is a shell company, and it's connected to a Ponzi scheme investigation the FBI has been running for 2 years. The same Ponzi scheme Kevin lost money in. Exactly. But here's the thing, Kevin wasn't just a victim. He was a recruiter. 2 hours later, I was sitting in a conference room at the FBI field office. Carter had arranged everything. Across from me sat Gerald Patterson, a 45-year-old accountant, with tired eyes and a weathered face. Mr. Brennan, Gerald said, shaking my hand. Detective Carter told me about your daughter. I'm sorry for your loss. Thank you, I managed. The detective said you have information about Kevin Marshall. Gerald's expression hardened. Your son-in-law cost me everything. I lost $180,000 in that Ponzi scheme. My retirement, my kids' college fund, everything I'd worked for. He pulled out a folder thick with documents. But here's what you need to understand. Kevin Marshall wasn't a victim like the rest of us. He was part of it. He recruited 12 people into that scheme, including me. The words didn't quite register at first. He recruited you. He gets 8% commission on every person he brings in, Gerald explained. Do the math on 12 people investing an average of $100,000 each. That's $96,000 in commissions. $95,000. The mysterious MZ consulting deposit. Kevin spent it all on gambling, Gerald continued. And then he borrowed more trying to chase his losses. That's why he's still $385,000 in debt, even after earning all that money. Your son-in-law is a professional con artist, Mr. Brennan. He's been lying to and stealing from vulnerable people for years. Who did he target? I asked, though I thought I already knew the answer. Elderly people mostly. Immigrants who trusted him because he spoke their language. People who believed he was trying to help them. Gerald's voice was bitter. If Kevin Marshall could steal the life savings of strangers without blinking, imagine what he'd be capable of doing to his own wife. The pieces clicked into place. This wasn't just a desperate man who'd killed for insurance money. This was a pattern, a history of calculated cruelty, evidence that Kevin Marshall was exactly the kind of person who could plan and execute a murder. 48 hours after the hearing, I was back in that courtroom, my hands gripping the bench again. But this time, Carol Bennett had new evidence to present. Gerald Patterson's testimony, the FBI's investigation, the proof that Kevin wasn't a desperate victim, but a habitual criminal. The judge looked over the documents for what felt like an eternity. Then he looked up. Based on the new evidence presented regarding the defendant's pattern of criminal behavior, the motion to dismiss is denied. This case will proceed to trial. For the first time since this nightmare began, I saw Kevin's face go pale. The confident smirk he'd worn throughout the hearing vanished. His lawyer leaned over to whisper something, but Kevin just stared straight ahead, his jaw tight. As the bailiff led him out of the courtroom, Kevin turned and looked back at me. Our eyes met, and in that moment I saw it, real fear. He'd been so confident, so certain that his money and his lawyers would save him. But justice was coming, and Kevin Marshall was finally beginning to realize that he couldn't buy his way out of this. While Kevin sat in his lawyer's office, confident and free on bail, Chelsea Parker was on the run. For 3 weeks, she'd paid cash at roadside motels, used burner phones, and jumped at every siren. The guilty always run, but they can't run forever. Detective Carter coordinated the manhunt with a precision I'd come to expect from him. He called me every few days with updates, keeping me in the loop even when there wasn't much to report. Chelsea had withdrawn cash from ATMs across 3 states, Tennessee, Kentucky, Ohio. She stayed at cheap motels, never more than 2 nights in the same place. She used prepaid credit cards and burner phones that were impossible to trace. Somewhere along the way, she dyed her hair from blonde to dark brown and started wearing glasses. "Why, she's smart," Carter told me during one call. "We're scared enough to be careful. But everyone makes mistakes eventually." The breakthrough came from an unexpected source. Megan Parker was 27 years old and Chelsea's younger sister. I learned about her later after everything was already in motion. Carter filled me in on the details once the arrest was made. Megan had called the police tip line, her voice shaking. "Oh, I love my sister," she'd told the detective who answered. "But I can't live with what she did. A woman is dead. A little girl almost died. I can't just pretend that's okay." Chelsea had called Megan from a burner phone the night before. She'd been crying, panicking, saying things that made Megan realize how deep the trouble went. "She told me she was scared," Megan said during her interview with Carter. "She said Kevin had lied to her, that she didn't know what they were really doing until it was too late. She kept saying, 'I didn't know, Meg. I swear I didn't know.'" Carter had listened carefully, taking notes. "Your sister made a terrible mistake," he'd said gently. "But she's not a monster like Kevin Marshall. If she's willing to tell the truth, she deserves that chance." Megan had provided Chelsea's last known location, a budget inn outside Cincinnati, room 14. The arrest happened at dawn. A tactical team surrounded the motel while it was still dark. Chelsea must have seen them from her window because she tried to run. She made it out of her room and into the parking lot before 3 officers tackled her to the asphalt. Carter showed me the arrest photo later. Chelsea looked nothing like the blonde woman in her driver's license picture. Her dark hair was stringy, her face pale and gaunt. She'd lost weight. The fear in her eyes was unmistakable. "And I want a lawyer!" she'd screamed as they cuffed her. Kevin said this would be easy. He lied to me about everything. At the police station, Chelsea broke down completely. I wasn't there for the interrogation. Victims' families aren't allowed, but Carter gave me a detailed summary afterward. Chelsea had been a mess. Crying, shaking, asking for water every 5 minutes. She kept saying the same things over and over. Kevin promised we'd be together. He said Allison was keeping his money, keeping him trapped. He said she deserved it for making his life miserable. "Did Kevin tell you about the life insurance policy?" Carter had asked. Chelsea had gone quiet. Then, in a small voice, "Not at first. Not until after they'd killed my daughter." That's when Kevin had told Chelsea about the $500,000. He'd used her for the murder, then dangled the money as a reward. 2 days after Chelsea's arrest, her court-appointed public defender approached District Attorney Carol Bennett with an offer. "My client wants to cooperate," the lawyer said. "She has information about the planning, the execution, everything that happened that night. She'll testify against Kevin Marshall." "What does she want in return?" Carol asked. "Study a reduced sentence. Second-degree murder instead of first. 25 years instead of life without parole." That evening, Detective Carter called me at home. I was in the kitchen making dinner for Amelia when my phone rang. "The Paul Chelsea Parker's lawyer has offered a deal. She'll testify against Kevin if we reduce the charge to second-degree murder." My hand tightened on the phone. How much time would she serve? 25 years. She'd be 55 when she got out. I closed my eyes. 25 years. Allison would have been 59. Would have watched Amelia graduate high school, college, maybe get married. Would have had a whole lifetime that Chelsea had stolen from her. "It's not enough," I said. "Not for what she did." I know," Carter said quietly. "But without her testimony, Kevin might walk. His lawyer is that good, Paul. Gerald Hawkins will attack every piece of evidence we have. He'll say the financial motive is circumstantial. He'll claim Amelia's testimony is unreliable because she's a traumatized child. He'll create reasonable doubt. And with Chelsea's testimony, we have an eyewitness who was there, who can describe exactly how Kevin planned it, how they executed it, what he said during and after. It's the difference between a strong case and an airtight one. I sat down at the kitchen table, the phone pressed to my ear. Through the doorway, I could see Amelia in the living room, coloring with Emma while Joyce supervised. My granddaughter, who'd survived 7 days in a closet. Who'd trusted me to come for her. "What happens if I say no?" I asked. "Carol Bennett can offer the deal without your approval, but she wants to know how you feel. This is your daughter we're talking about. Your family." I stared at my hands. Hands that had held Allison when she was born. Hands that had found Amelia in that closet. Hands that were empty now because my daughter was gone. Accept partial justice for Chelsea, or risk Kevin going free entirely. "Tell Carol I agree to the deal," I said finally. "But make sure Chelsea knows something." "What's that?" 25 years is mercy. The kind of mercy she didn't give my daughter. 3 days after I agreed to Chelsea's plea deal, I walked into District Attorney Carol Bennett's office to hear the full story. She met me at the door, her expression grave. "This won't be easy, Paul," she said. "You're going to hear details that stay with you." "I need to hear them," I replied. "I have to understand exactly what happened to my daughter." She nodded and led me to a conference room where Detective Carter was already waiting. Carol sat across from me with a thick folder between us. Chelsea Parker's testimony is crucial, she began. She was present that night. She can describe the planning, what happened inside the house, and the cover-up. Her account will support the forensic evidence and Amelia's testimony. Can we convict Kevin without her? I asked. Carol paused before answering. We have a strong case. The motive is clear: $500,000 in life insurance against $385,000 in debt. The forensic evidence proves violence occurred in that house. We have Amelia's statement about what she heard, and we have Gerald Patterson's testimony, establishing Kevin's pattern of manipulating vulnerable people. She folded her hands. But Gerald Hawkins is one of the best defense attorneys in the state. He will challenge everything. He'll argue the financial evidence is circumstantial. He'll claim Amelia is too young and traumatized to be reliable. He will manufacture doubt. She met my eyes. Chelsea eliminates that doubt. She can describe Kevin's planning in detail, his words, his actions. She makes this case nearly impossible to dismantle. Every part of me wanted to pull back. 25 years in prison didn't feel like enough for what Chelsea had done. But then I pictured Amelia in that hospital bed, gripping my hand, asking when we could say goodbye to her mother properly. I need to make a call, I said. I stepped into the hallway and dialed Joyce Wallace. Paul, she answered. Is everything okay? I need your advice, I said. About the plea deal. Part of me wants to withdraw it. I want Chelsea to face everything. Joyce was quiet for a moment. When she spoke, her voice was steady. I loved Allison like a sister. I want Chelsea punished. But more than that, I want Kevin Marshall locked away for the rest of his life. Do whatever guarantees that. That's what matters. That's what Allison would want. She was right. When I returned to the conference room, I nodded at Carol. Let's hear it. Carol guided us down a hallway to a smaller room with a one-way mirror. On the other side, Chelsea sat at a table with her public defender and a court reporter. She didn't know I was watching. You deserve to hear this, Carol said quietly. This is her formal proffer session. I sat beside Carter. Chelsea looked smaller than I'd imagined. Her dark hair was tied back. She wore an orange jumpsuit, hands cuffed. Her eyes were swollen from crying. Carol entered the room and sat across from her. The court reporter positioned her fingers over the machine. Miss Parker, Carol began to describe how Kevin Marshall first approached you. Chelsea's voice trembled. About 8 weeks before that night, I was at a casino outside the city. I'd been gambling, trying to win back money I'd lost. Kevin found me there. We dated years ago before he married Allison. What did he tell you? He said his marriage was falling apart. That Allison was trying to take everything from him. He said if I helped him, we could be together and split the insurance money. My jaw tightened. How did the planning proceed? Carol asked. Kevin organized it. He rented a storage unit under a fake name and paid cash for 3 months. He bought cleaning supplies. He told me what would happen. What was supposed to happen, Chelsea swallowed. He said we'd convince Allison to increase her life insurance and sign some documents. If she refused, he said we'd have to take more serious steps. The room felt colder. Tell me about Saturday evening. We arrived around 9:45, Chelsea said. Kevin knocked. Allison opened the door. She was confused to see us together. Kevin said he needed her to sign papers. She refused. She told us to leave. Chelsea wiped her eyes. Kevin said we couldn't leave things unfinished, that we had to follow through with the plan. I gripped the armrests of my chair and forced myself to stay silent. Listening was how we would win. What happened afterward? Carol asked. Kevin took control, Chelsea said. Afterward, he used Allison's phone to send text messages. He cleaned the house with bleach. Then we moved her to the storage unit. Did you see or hear anyone else in the house? Chelsea hesitated, then nodded. As we were getting ready to leave, I heard a sound upstairs. I asked Kevin about it. He said not to worry, that we needed to leave immediately. My vision blurred. He had heard something, maybe Amelia shifting in that closet, maybe a small cough, and he chose to leave anyway. The session continued for another hour, detailing steps, timelines, and cover-up efforts. When it ended, I walked out on unsteady legs. Carter caught my arm. "You okay?" "No," I said honestly. "But I will be when Kevin is convicted." Carol joined us. "We're setting trial for early November. That gives us 8 months to prepare. With Chelsea's testimony, the forensic evidence, Amelia's account, and Gerald Patterson's information, we're building a case Kevin's money can't undo. 8 months. 8 more months of waiting." As I drove home that evening, I replayed Chelsea's words. Kevin had heard a sound upstairs. He had known someone might be there, and he left. It wasn't just greed. It wasn't only about $500,000 or gambling debts. It was about a man so consumed by himself that the possibility of a 10-year-old child upstairs didn't matter enough to check. I would make sure a jury understood that. Every single one of them. 12 months. 1 full year since Kevin ended my daughter's life. 365 days of investigation, evidence gathering, and fighting through a legal system that sometimes felt designed to protect the guilty. Now finally we stood in a courtroom where truth would have its voice. I walked into the courthouse on that cold November morning with Joyce beside me. Amelia had stayed home with Emma. We'd decided she didn't need to see any of this until it was her turn to testify. The media had turned out in force. Cameras, microphones, reporters shouting questions about the shocking murder case. I walked past them all without saying a word. Inside the courtroom, the jury had already been selected. 7 women, 5 men ranging from their 20s to their 60s. I'd studied each of their faces during selection, trying to read who they were, what they believed, whether they'd see through Kevin's lies. Kevin sat at the defense table in an expensive navy suit, his hair neatly trimmed, looking for all the world like an innocent man wrongly accused. That was Gerald Hawkins's strategy: make Kevin look sympathetic, while pinning everything on Chelsea Parker. "All rise," the bailiff called. Judge Patricia Morrison entered and took her seat. She was in her late 50s with sharp eyes that missed nothing. Carol had told me Judge Morrison had a reputation for running a tight courtroom and not tolerating games from either side. "The prosecution may give its opening statement," Judge Morrison said. Carol Bennett stood and walked to the jury box. She looked at each juror in turn before speaking. "This is a case about greed," she began, her voice clear and strong. "About a man who looked at his wife and saw only a paycheck. $500,000. That's the price Kevin Marshall believed Allison Brennan's life was worth." She paused, letting that sink in. "Over the next several days, you'll hear testimony about Kevin Marshall's debts. $385,000 he owed to casinos, to the victims of a Ponzi scheme he helped run, to loan sharks and credit card companies. You'll hear about how he planned this crime for weeks, renting a storage unit under a fake name, buying cleaning supplies, rehearsing his story." Carol's voice softened. "But you'll also hear from a 10-year-old girl named Amelia, a child who survived 7 days alone in a closet because her mother taught her how to hide. A mother who knew she was in danger but couldn't escape in time." I watched the jury. Several of the women had already started to tear up. "The evidence will show that Kevin Marshall murdered his wife for insurance money," Carol continued. "And then he left his daughter to die because checking on her would have been inconvenient. Listen to the evidence. Look at the facts. And when you do, you'll see exactly what Kevin Marshall is: a man who values money more than human life." She sat down. The courtroom was silent. Gerald Hawkins stood next. Where Carol had been passionate, he was smooth, likable, the kind of lawyer who made you want to trust him. "Kevin Marshall is not a saint," Hawkins began. "He made mistakes. He got into debt. He made poor financial decisions. But he is not the cold-blooded killer the prosecution wants you to believe." Hawkins walked toward the jury, his hands open in a gesture of honesty. "The real villain in this case is Chelsea Parker, a manipulative woman who rekindled an old romance with Kevin, seduced him, convinced him to help her, and then took matters into her own hands. Kevin Marshall was in another room when Allison died. He didn't know what Chelsea was doing until it was too late. I felt my jaw clench. Lies, all lies. Chelsea Parker has admitted her guilt. Hawkins continued. She's serving 25 years in prison, but she made a deal with prosecutors to testify against Kevin in exchange for that reduced sentence. Ask yourselves, what is her testimony really worth? Can you trust a woman who would do anything to reduce her prison time? He paused. Kevin Marshall is a victim here too. A victim of Chelsea Parker's manipulation. And I ask you to keep an open mind as you hear the evidence. The first witness was a forensic expert who testified about the blood evidence found in Allison's living room. The luminol photos were displayed on screens throughout the courtroom. Even cleaned the room had glowed with traces of what had happened there. DNA was recovered from under the victim's fingernails, the expert said. It matched Kevin Marshall. Meaning she scratched him during a struggle? Carol asked. Yes. Mrs. Gladys Whitmore took the stand next. At 73, she was sharp as ever, wearing a floral dress and pearls. I saw a silver SUV parked outside the Brennan house that Saturday night, she testified. Around 10 o'clock. Are you certain of the time? Carol asked. Positive. I just finished watching my television program. On cross-examination, Hawkins tried to shake her. Mrs. Whitmore, it was dark that night. And raining. Are you sure you saw what you think you saw? Mrs. Whitmore fixed him with a look that could have frozen water. Young man, I'm 73, not senile. I know what I saw. Several jurors smiled. Then came Logan, Mrs. Whitmore's 16-year-old grandson. He looked nervous in his button-down shirt and khakis, but his testimony was clear. I was in my room playing video games with my headphones on, Logan said. Around 11 that night, I looked out my window and saw two people carrying something large wrapped in a tarp. A man and a woman. They were loading it into the SUV. Could you tell what they were carrying? Carol asked gently. No, ma'am, but it looked heavy. They were both struggling with it. Hawkins tried to discredit him. You were focused on your video game, correct? Yes, sir. But I remember because they looked suspicious, like they were trying not to be seen. The second day of trial brought more emotional testimony. Joyce Wallace took the stand, dabbing at her eyes with a tissue. Allison came to me 2 weeks before she died, Joyce said. She told me Kevin was demanding she increase her life insurance to $750,000. She refused. She was afraid of him. Did you see any signs of physical abuse? Carol asked. Yes. I saw bruises on her arm. When I asked, she said she'd fallen. But I knew better. I should have done more to help her. Courtney Mills testified next, showing text messages Allison had sent her. I need to get Amelia and me out safely, one read. Another said, I'm planning to file for divorce, but I'm scared of what Kevin will do. Finally, Dr. Joyce Hamilton took the stand. She'd been Allison's mentor when she'd first started nursing. I trained that girl. Dr. Hamilton said, her voice thick with emotion. I loved her like a daughter, and over the last 6 months I watched her become withdrawn. Quiet. Not herself. Did you ever speak to her about it? Carol asked. Once. I asked her if everything was all right at home. She looked at me and said, Dr. Hamilton, please pray for me. I watched the jury throughout all of it. Watched their faces change as each witness testified. Some seemed increasingly skeptical of Kevin's innocent appearance. Others still looked sympathetic, wanting to believe Hawkins's story about manipulation and victimhood. But patterns were emerging. Doubt was creeping in. I needed them to see what I saw, a man who'd looked at his wife and seen only a check waiting to be cashed. When court adjourned on the second day, Carol approached the bench. Your Honor, tomorrow morning we call Amelia Brennan to the stand. The courtroom buzzed with whispers. Kevin's lawyer immediately objected, arguing that the child was too young, too traumatized. Judge Morrison overruled him. "The witness will testify," she said firmly. That night I held Amelia as she cried. "I don't want to see him, Grandpa." She sobbed into my shoulder. "I know, sweetheart," I said, stroking her hair. "But your mother taught you to be brave. Tomorrow we need that bravery one more time. For her." Before I share what Amelia said on that witness stand, I need to know you're still here with me. A 10-year-old child is about to look her father in the eyes and tell a jury the truth about what he did. If you think she's brave beyond measure, type brave in the comments below. Let me see it. Quick reminder. This story includes some fictional elements created for educational purposes. If you'd rather not continue, you're welcome to exit now. But if you want to hear how this little girl found the courage to speak her truth, stay with me. Trial Day 3. The courtroom was more crowded than before. Rumor had spread that a 10-year-old child would testify against her own father. I arrived early with Amelia and Dr. Samantha Reed. My granddaughter wore a simple blue dress, her hair pulled back in a neat ponytail. The stuffed bunny was tucked in my jacket pocket just in case. She looked so small standing there in the hallway. But I'd learned something over the past year: small doesn't mean weak. In the witness preparation room, Amelia sat quietly, her hands folded in her lap. Dr. Reed knelt beside her. "Remember what we talked about," Dr. Reed said gently. "Just tell the truth. If you get scared, look at your grandfather. He'll be right there." Judge Morrison had offered a special accommodation, a privacy screen, that would block Kevin's view of Amelia while she testified. Many courts used them for child witnesses, but Amelia had refused. "No screen," she'd said, her voice small but firm. "I want to look at him." I was proud and terrified in equal measure. When it was time, the court clerk called Amelia's name. She walked into that courtroom with her head high, though I could see her hands trembling. The clerk helped her onto the witness stand. She was so small, she needed a footstool to reach the microphone. The clerk administered the oath. "Do you promise to tell the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth?" Amelia's voice was barely above a whisper. "I promise." The courtroom fell completely silent. Carol Bennett approached the witness stand slowly, her expression gentle and warm. "Hi, Amelia," she began. "Can you tell the jury where you were on Saturday, November 18th of last year?" "Seen in my room," Amelia said. Her voice was quiet but clear. Then I heard yelling downstairs. "So what did you hear?" "My dad and a woman. They were yelling at my mom really loud, arguing about money." "What did your mother say?" Mom kept saying no, that she wouldn't help them anymore." Carol nodded encouragingly. "What happened next?" Amelia's voice got smaller. "Mom had told me before if I ever heard loud arguing I should hide in my closet and not come out until she called me. So I did that." "What did you hear from inside the closet?" "Scary sounds." Amelia's hands gripped the edge of the witness box, like things breaking. And Mom was crying. She was begging them to stop. Several jurors were already crying. I watched their faces, saw the horror and sympathy there. "Did your mother stop making sounds?" Carol asked gently. Amelia nodded, tears spilling down her cheeks. "Yes. After my dad said, 'I'm sorry,' everything went quiet." I glanced at Kevin. His jaw was clenched so tight, I thought it might snap. When Amelia repeated his words, "I'm sorry," he'd looked like he wanted to disappear. Carol let the silence stretch for a moment. Then she asked the question that mattered most. "Amelia, how long were you in that closet?" My granddaughter's voice broke. 7 days. I waited for Mom to call me out like she promised, but she never did." The courtroom erupted in quiet sobs. Even some of the male jurors were wiping their eyes. I felt tears streaming down my own face but didn't move to wipe them away. "Who finally found you?" Carol asked. Amelia looked directly at me. My grandpa. He never gave up. Throughout her testimony, Kevin had been trying to stare at Amelia, some pathetic attempt to intimidate his own daughter. Judge Morrison noticed. "Mr. Marshall," she said sharply, "face forward. Do not look at the witness." Kevin's lawyer touched his arm, and he reluctantly turned away. When Carol finished, Gerald Hawkins stood for cross-examination. He approached the stand carefully, his voice gentle. "Amelia, I know this is very hard," he began. "But isn't it possible you heard things wrong? It was nighttime. You were scared. Maybe, I know my dad's voice." Amelia interrupted, her voice suddenly strong. "And I know when he's lying." Hawkins looked startled. "Why would you say that?" "Because he lied to my grandpa. He said Mom and I went on a trip. But Mom was gone and I was in the closet." I saw Hawkins hesitate, searching for another angle. "Well, Amelia, could it have been the woman Chelsea who hurt your mother? Not your father?" "I heard both of them," Amelia said simply. "They did it together." Hawkins tried a few more questions, but Amelia didn't waver. Finally, he gave up. No further questions. Dr. Reed came forward to help Amelia down from the stand. As my granddaughter passed Kevin's table, she stopped. Everyone in the courtroom held their breath. She looked directly at Kevin, her small face composed. "Mom forgave him," she said, her voice clear in the silent room. "But I don't." Then she continued, walking her hand in Dr. Reed's, and left the courtroom. The silence was absolute, stunning. I glanced at the jury. Every single one of them was looking at Kevin differently now. The mask of the innocent, wrongly accused husband had shattered completely. His own daughter had testified against him with a clarity and conviction that no adult witness could match. Whatever sympathy Gerald Hawkins had built with some of the jurors, whatever doubt he'd tried to plant about Chelsea's role, about Paul's motives, about the circumstantial nature of the evidence, had vanished in that moment. But I knew Kevin's lawyer wasn't finished fighting yet. If Amelia's testimony had broken hearts, Chelsea Parker's would shatter Kevin's defense. Trial day 4. Chelsea walked into the courtroom in an orange prison jumpsuit and handcuffs. She'd already been convicted in a separate plea hearing. But her story would be the final nail in Kevin's coffin. The bailiff helped her onto the witness stand and removed one handcuff, securing it to the rail. Chelsea looked different from her arrest photo. Thinner, haunted. Her dark-dyed hair had grown out, showing blonde roots. She was sworn in. The jury already knew she'd pleaded guilty to second-degree murder and received 25 years. Some of them looked at her with open disgust. Chelsea's hands trembled as she sat down. She knew everyone in that room hated her. Carol Bennett approached, slowly establishing the timeline first. "Miss Parker, how did you reconnect with Kevin Marshall?" "We met at a casino about 10 weeks before Allison died," Chelsea said, her voice barely audible. "Kevin was charming. He said his marriage was over, that he still had feelings for me." "When did the planning begin?" "About 8 weeks before. Kevin said, 'I need your help with something. Can you keep a secret?'" "What was the plan?" Chelsea swallowed hard. "Kevin said Allison was keeping his money, that she'd updated her life insurance policy and he deserved half of it. He asked if I would help him, convince her to cooperate." "Did you know it was a plan to end Allison's life?" Chelsea tried to maintain her innocence. "At first he said we'd just scare her. I didn't know. I didn't realize it would go that far." Carol's voice turned sharp. "But you helped plan the storage unit rental. You purchased cleaning supplies. That sounds very premeditated, Miss Parker." Chelsea's composure cracked. "Okay, yes. Kevin laid it all out. He said we'd make it look like she ran away. We'd split the insurance money and start over in Mexico." The jury's faces hardened. "Tell us what happened on Saturday night, November 18th. Chelsea took a shaky breath. "We arrived at the house around 9:45. Kevin was very angry. He'd just found out Allison had discovered all his debts. When we went inside, Kevin demanded she sign financial power of attorney papers giving him control of everything. What did Allison say? She refused, said she was done enabling him, that she was filing for divorce. What happened then? Kevin lost it. Chelsea's voice dropped to almost a whisper. He grabbed her. She tried to fight back. I helped hold her while she struggled. Kevin said, "If you won't help me willingly, I'll do it another way." And we took her last breath. The courtroom fell into horrified silence. Carol let that sink in before asking the question that mattered most. What happened after Allison died? We wrapped her in a tarp. Chelsea said, tears streaming down her face. Started carrying her out to my SUV. That's when I heard a noise from upstairs. I asked Kevin, "What about Amelia? Is she home?" The jury leaned forward. And what did Kevin say? Chelsea's voice broke. He said, and I'll never forget this, she's probably at a sleepover. Even if she's here by the time anyone finds anything, we'll be in Mexico with the money. Several jurors gasped. One woman covered her mouth in horror. Kevin had known, had heard something upstairs, and he'd deliberately chosen to leave his daughter to die rather than check on her. What did you do to cover up the crime? Carol continued. Kevin used Allison's phone to send fake text messages, made it look like she'd left voluntarily. He assured me the police would never suspect us. Throughout Chelsea's testimony, Kevin sat at the defense table, shaking his head, muttering lies under his breath. His lawyer kept objecting, hearsay, self-serving testimony. But Judge Morrison overruled most of them. When Carol finished, Gerald Hawkins stood for cross-examination. His approach was brutal. "You're lying to save yourself, aren't you?" he demanded. "You made a deal with prosecutors. 25 years instead of life. You'd say anything to get that reduced sentence." Chelsea was crying now. "Yes, I made a deal, because I'm guilty. But Kevin's guilty too. He planned everything. Isn't it true that you manipulated Kevin, that you needed money for your gambling debts?" I had debts," Chelsea admitted. "But Kevin had more, and Kevin had the life insurance policy. This was his plan." Hawkins pressed harder. "How convenient to blame the man who can't run away, because he's the defendant in this case." Chelsea's composure finally shattered completely. "I'm guilty!" she shouted. "I know that I'll spend 25 years in prison thinking about what I did, but Kevin was the one who looked at his wife and saw an obstacle. He's the monster. I was just stupid enough to believe he loved me." The outburst stunned the courtroom. Even Hawkins seemed taken aback. Judge Morrison called for order. Chelsea was crying so hard she could barely breathe. A bailiff brought her tissues. I watched it all from the gallery, feeling absolutely nothing for Chelsea Parker. Her apologies wouldn't bring Allison back. Her tears wouldn't erase what she'd done. But watching Kevin's defense collapse piece by piece that mattered. When Chelsea was finally excused, she was led out of the courtroom in handcuffs. She didn't look at anyone. Carol Bennett stood and addressed the judge. "Your Honor, the state rests its case. The foundation was solid. Forensic evidence, witness testimony, Amelia's heartbreaking account, and now Chelsea's detailed confession that corroborated everything." It was the defense's turn. Gerald Hawkins rose slowly, buttoning his expensive suit jacket. He looked at the jury, then at Judge Morrison. "Your Honor, the defense calls Kevin Marshall to the stand." My blood ran cold. Kevin was going to testify. He was going to try to lie his way out of this the same way he'd lied his way into my daughter's life. But this time, I would be watching. And so would 12 jurors who had already heard the truth. Kevin Marshall took the witness stand like a man who'd rehearsed his role 100 times. Confident. Wronged. The victim. But lies always have a way of unraveling under pressure. and I was sitting in the front row, ready to watch every thread get pulled. He was sworn in, wearing an expensive charcoal suit, clean-shaven, his hair perfectly combed. He looked at the jury, making eye contact with each of them, trying to establish some kind of connection. Gerald Hawkins approached with his prepared questions. "Did Kevin tell the jury about your marriage with Allison?" Kevin's voice was measured, coached. "We had our problems. Money was tight. I made mistakes getting into debt. But I loved Allison. I loved her deeply. Did you ever hurt your wife?" "Never. Not once in 11 years of marriage." "Do you know how Allison died?" Kevin's face arranged itself into an expression of grief. I thought maybe she'd left, or that someone else had hurt her. Maybe Chelsea acting alone. Why would Chelsea hurt Allison?" "Chelsea was obsessed with me. She wouldn't let go of our past relationship. Maybe she eliminated Allison out of jealousy." I watched from my seat, my hands clenched on the armrests. Every word was a lie, and he spoke them so smoothly. Then Carol Bennett stood for cross-examination. She walked toward Kevin slowly, calmly, like a predator circling prey. "Mr. Marshall, your wife's body was found in a storage unit that you rented, correct?" Someone must have framed me, used my identity. "Your fingerprints were on the rental contract." Kevin stumbled. I must have signed something Chelsea gave me. I didn't know what it was." "Your DNA was found under Allison's fingernails. How did it get there?" "No, we had an argument earlier that week. She may have scratched me then." The medical examiner testified that those skin cells were fresh, from the very night she died. "I can explain," Carol cut him off. "You searched online for, how long does life insurance pay out 3 weeks before your wife died? Explain that." "Ma, that was research. I'm a financial advisor. Clients ask these questions." "Name one client you advised about life insurance that month." Kevin went silent. I don't remember specific names." Carol's voice remained level, but the pressure was building. "You recruited 12 people into a Ponzi scheme and earned $95,000 in commission, correct?" "That's not relevant to this case." "It's relevant to your character, Mr. Marshall. You made $95,000 by lying to vulnerable people. Then you gambled it all away." I was a victim of that scheme too." "No, Mr. Marshall. You were a recruiter. The FBI has proof. You're a professional con artist." Kevin's careful composure was starting to crack. "This is ridiculous." "Chelsea Parker testified that you knew Amelia might be in the house. That you said, 'By the time anyone finds anything, we'll be in Mexico with the money.' Is that true?" "Chelsea is lying to save herself." Carol's voice turned sharp. "Your daughter testified that she heard you say, 'I'm sorry,' right before her mother stopped breathing. Is Amelia lying too?" "She was confused. She's just a child." "Mr. Marshall, you saw your wife as a final score to fix your debts, didn't you? $500,000 to solve all your problems." That's when Kevin exploded. She should have helped me. We were married. That money was mine too. She owed me everything He stopped mid-sentence, realizing his mistake. The courtroom erupted in gasps and whispers. Judge Morrison banged her gavel. "Order!" But the damage was done. Kevin had just admitted exactly what Carol had accused him of. He'd seen Allison as money, not a person. In the chaos, Kevin started crying fake tears I could see through from across the room. "No, I loved her," he sobbed. "Paul never believed that he poisoned Allison against me from the beginning." I couldn't stay silent. I jumped to my feet. "You're a liar!" Judge Morrison turned to me. "Mr. Brennan, sit down immediately, or I will hold you in contempt of court." Detective Carter grabbed my arm and pulled me back into my seat. But in that moment, Kevin and I locked eyes across the courtroom. For 1 second, just one, Kevin's mask fell completely. His face went cold, empty. Those were the eyes of someone who felt nothing. Dead eyes. Then the fake tears returned, the wounded husband act resumed. But the jury had seen it. That flash of what Kevin Marshall really was underneath all the lies. Gerald Hawkins tried to salvage things with redirect examination, asking softball questions to give Kevin a chance to explain. But it was too late. Every answer Kevin gave now sounded hollow, desperate. When Kevin was finally excused and led back to the defense table, he was shaking. Judge Morrison addressed both sides. Closing arguments will begin tomorrow morning at 9 a.m. Court is adjourned. As the bailiff called for everyone to rise, I watched Kevin lean over and whisper frantically to Gerald Hawkins. The panic was clear in his eyes. He knew what I knew. His lies had finally caught up with him. Hawkins shook his head at whatever Kevin was asking. No. Whatever desperate play Kevin wanted to make, it wasn't going to happen. Tomorrow the jury would begin deliberations, and I'd spent 12 months making sure they would see the truth. The 8th day of trial. Closing arguments. The climax of a year of fighting, gathering evidence, and refusing to let my daughter's death go unanswered. Both sides would deliver their final arguments. Then we would wait. Prosecutor Carol Bennett stepped to the center of the courtroom, her voice ringing out in the silent space. Kevin Marshall planned to murder his wife for 2 months. He recruited an accomplice. He researched the payouts. He stood in that living room and took away Allison Brennan's last breath. Then he abandoned his 10-year-old daughter alone to die. For money. $500,000. That's the price he put on Allison's life. Don't let him get away with it. Defense attorney Gerald Hawkins stood adjusting his tie. Kevin Marshall is guilty of poor judgment, of debt, of trusting the wrong woman. But murder, premeditated murder. The evidence isn't there. Chelsea Parker is the real killer. She manipulated Kevin, killed Allison, and now she's cutting a deal to blame Kevin. There is reasonable doubt. You must acquit. I watched the jury's faces, hard to read. Some seemed decided, others still uncertain. Judge Patricia Morrison struck her gavel. Before the jury deliberates, I'm allowing Mr. Paul Brennan to speak. I stepped to the stand, hands trembling, looking at the jury, then at Kevin. My name is Paul Brennan. Allison was my only daughter. For 34 years, she was the center of my world. Kevin Marshall didn't just take her life. He destroyed my granddaughter's childhood. He left a 10-year-old child to waste away alone in a closet thinking she'd been abandoned. Allison was a nurse. She spent her life saving people, healing them, and the person she trusted most ended that life for insurance money. My voice broke. I will never walk her down the aisle again, never see her grow old, never hear her laugh at my terrible jokes. Kevin took everything. I looked straight into his eyes. You won't escape this. Not while I'm breathing. And Allison, she wasn't just a victim. She was a mother who loved her child so much, she taught her how to survive even when she couldn't. That's her legacy. Not how she died, but the love she left behind. I sat down, tears falling, several jurors crying too. The jury was dismissed at 2 p.m. to deliberate. I waited with Joyce Wallace in the courthouse hallway, while Amelia stayed home with Emma. Hours crawled by like decades, 3 o'clock, 4, 5, 6. I worried, what if they don't believe us? Detective Noah reassured me, they believe. I saw their faces when Kevin testified. At 8 p.m., the jury sent word they had a verdict. Everyone returned to the courtroom. The judge asked, has the jury reached a verdict? The foreperson, a woman in her 50s, stood, we have your honor. I held my breath. In the case of the state of Tennessee versus Kevin Marshall on the charge of premeditated murder resulting in death, how do you find? Her voice rang out clearly. We find the defendant guilty. The courtroom erupted. The judge continued through the other charges: conspiracy guilty, child endangerment guilty, all counts guilty. I closed my eyes, tears of relief streaming down. Kevin's face showed shock, denial, fury. His lawyer immediately requested an appeal, but was denied. 2 weeks later, in early December, I returned to the courtroom for sentencing. The judge read, Kevin Marshall, you have been found guilty by a jury of taking the life of your wife, Allison Brennan, in a calculated, premeditated act for financial gain. You have shown no remorse. You left your daughter to die. You manipulated everyone around you. I sentence you to life in prison without the possibility of parole. Kevin exploded. This is wrong. I didn't. Security officers restrained him, dragging him from the courtroom as he screamed. Chelsea Parker received 25 years eligible for parole after 20. I watched Kevin being led away in chains. He looked back one last time. I didn't look away. I wanted him to see that I had won, that justice had won. Outside the courthouse, reporters swarmed, microphones thrust in my face. Mr. Brennan, how do you feel? I didn't answer, didn't need to. I walked past them to where Joyce waited with Amelia, my granddaughter. Our granddaughter now ran into my arms. Is it over, Grandpa? Yes, sweetheart, I said, holding her tight. It's over. He can never hurt anyone again. She buried her head in my shoulder. Can we go home, home? Not back to Tennessee where I used to live, not Allison's empty house, but home wherever Amelia and I would build a life together. Yes, I whispered, let's go home. 6 months after Kevin Marshall was sentenced to life in prison, people still ask me, how do you move forward after something like that? The answer is never simple. You don't move on from losing a child. You learn to carry it differently. You find new reasons to wake up each morning. For me, that reason has a name, Amelia. We built a new life together in Tennessee. I renovated my house for her, painted her bedroom soft blue, installed shelves for her books and drawings. She started 5th grade at the local elementary school. Her best friend is Emma Joyce Wallace's daughter. Every Saturday they take art classes together. Therapy with Dr. Samantha Reed continues now monthly instead of weekly. The nightmares come maybe once a month instead of every night. She laughs more. God, I treasure that sound. She still keeps her stuffed bunny but doesn't clutch it constantly. She talks about Allison openly. Grandpa, remember when Mom taught me to make pancakes? She's learning she can be happy without feeling guilty. My own healing is messier. The pain is still there, but the edges have softened. I found purpose in raising Amelia, in honoring Allison's memory. Sunday dinners at Joyce's house became our tradition. I started teaching electrical work part-time again. And one Saturday morning in the garage, I found myself teaching Amelia the same way I'd taught her mother decades before. Amelia sat on a wooden stool, small hands covered in grease, face scrunched in concentration, as she studied the lamp we were fixing. She looked exactly like Allison at that age. This blue wire connects to the neutral, I explained. See? Because everything needs a path to return to right, she said. I smiled through the ache. Exactly, sweetheart. You sound just like your mom. Is that okay? That's the best thing you could possibly be. We worked in silence before she asked, Grandpa, why does Miss Joyce help us so much they didn't have to? I set down my tools. Because your mother loved people so well, sweetheart. She took care of Joyce when Joyce's husband was sick. She was always there for everyone. And when you love people well, they love you back. Amelia frowned. But Mom's gone. How can they still love her? Love doesn't disappear when someone dies. It just grows. Like an electrical current, it keeps flowing through everyone who's connected. Her face brightened. So we're all connected, like wires. Exactly like wires. Later that week, I visited Allison's grave alone. The small cemetery was quiet, peaceful. I sat beside the headstone, tracing her name. I got justice for you, baby girl," I whispered. "Kevin will spend the rest of his life in a cell. I hope it haunts him every day." My voice cracked. "Amelia's doing okay. She's strong like you. I'm teaching her electrical work. She's good at it. Smart, just like her mother. I miss you every day, but I'm taking care of her. I promise." People ask how I keep going. The answer is simple: I have to. For Amelia, for Allison's memory. Kevin took my daughter, but he couldn't take our love. He couldn't take our family. He couldn't take our hope. The pain doesn't disappear. You just learn to carry it differently. Amelia asks about her mother often. We talk about Allison, the skilled nurse, the loving mother, the woman who taught her child how to survive, even when she couldn't survive herself. That's Allison's legacy. Not how she died, but how she lived. How she loved. How she prepared her daughter for a world without her. Every Friday at 6 o'clock, I still expect the phone to ring. Of course it doesn't. But sometimes when Amelia's laughing in the next room or showing me something she built, I feel Allison here. In the sunlight through the window, in the warmth of family at Joyce's table, in the connections that death cannot sever. Back in the garage, Amelia finished wiring the lamp. She plugged it in and flipped the switch. Light flooded the workspace. "I did it. It works," she shouted. "You certainly did, sweetheart. Your mom would be so proud." She threw her arms around me. "I love you, Grandpa." "I love you too, Amelia. Always." And to you listening to this story, remember this: I spent a year chasing justice for my daughter, and I got it. Kevin Marshall sits in a prison cell for the rest of his life. But if I could go back, I would tell myself one thing: trust your instincts sooner. The signs were there. The uncomfortable feeling at the wedding. The way Kevin's eyes shifted when he talked about money. The tension in Allison's voice during our last phone calls. I saw them all, but I told myself I was being paranoid, overprotective. Don't be like me. Don't wait until it's too late. This family story taught me that evil doesn't always announce itself with horns and fangs. Sometimes it wears a charming smile and calls you Dad. My dad revenge wasn't about hatred. It was about protecting the innocent and ensuring the guilty face consequences. But revenge, even righteous revenge, doesn't bring back what you've lost. It only ensures the darkness doesn't spread further. Looking back on this family story, I realized that Allison prepared Amelia not just for 7 days in a closet, but for a lifetime without her. She knew something was wrong. She tried to protect her child the only way she could. That's the power of a mother's love. It transcends death itself. And in pursuing my dad revenge, I learned that justice isn't just about punishment. It's about making sure the people we love didn't suffer in vain. God has a way of putting people in your path when you need them most. Joyce Wallace, Detective Noah Carter, Doctor Samantha Reed. They were all instruments of grace in the darkest chapter of our family story. I don't understand why God allowed Allison to die, and maybe I never will, but I know He didn't abandon us in that darkness. He gave us the strength to survive it. My advice: listen to that voice in your gut. If something feels wrong, investigate. Ask questions. Don't let politeness or fear of conflict silence your protective instincts. A father's or a dad's revenge should never be necessary, because we should act before tragedy strikes. If this story resonated with you, please take a moment to share it with someone who needs to hear it. Leave a comment below telling me what struck you most about this journey. And if you haven't already subscribed to this channel, your support helps these stories reach people who need them. Thank you for staying with me until the end of this painful but necessary family story. A final note: the stories on this channel may contain fictional elements created for educational purposes. If you find the content distressing or unsuitable, please feel free to exit and choose something more appropriate for you. Take care of yourselves and each other.